Hi everyone, I hope you can hear this. I hope it comes out clearly. I've trekked all over. You won't believe it, but I'm actually in downtown St. John's right now. We have a lot of walking paths and river areas and so forth. And I tried to find a spot where I could come and replicate a little bit of the wild in Wild Riders North. But everywhere I go, everything is too loud. I'm still in a city. Anyway, I'm hoping this works out. I'd like to start with my own mini land acknowledgement, because I am currently on the island of Newfoundland, which is the ancestral unceded territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq indigenous peoples. The Beothuk have actually left us forever because of the actions of the white settlers and the encroachment of European culture, and a very sad state of affairs. But hopefully through recognizing the culpability that we all share in this, we can make amends and reparations. And I would call, of course, on the government of Canada as well as Newfoundland to do everything in their power to make things right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you today from my new and selected poems. It's called Problematica. This is my book here. It is a selected edition, and what that kind of means is kind of like, for people who don't follow a lot of poetry, selected editions typically comes at a poet's mid-career point, and will take little bits and pieces from each of their previous books. And then in the case of a new and selected like mine, there's also new poems that haven't been collected before into volumes. So my selected runs from the years 1995 to 2000. That's about 25 years of poetry. Makes me feel older than I feel, but it's also a little bit like a best of album from a band. So I guess I could take that as a compliment. Anyway, with the sort of wilderness of Newfoundland around me and the ambient noises that you'll have to excuse, I hope to read to you a couple of poems. My first book was called Carousel, and Carousel was a book of non-traditional sonnets. I was only 28 years old. It wasn't the first book I wrote. The first book I wrote, I published second. So the Carousel was the book I wrote second. And it came out in a sort of a rush over the course of 6 months. And really what it was a set of 53 sonnets patterned on a deck of cards, divided into 4 suits with a joker at the end. And it was called Carousel. And it was basically, each one was like a eulogy or elegy for the dead, and each of the suits represented a different sort of surreal / farcical profession that included everything from real doctors and scientists and so forth to pseudoscientists to people with phobias and philias to actual carnival folk. So it had this sort of carnivalesque feel to it. And the poem I'm going to read from there, just as an example, is called The Lion Tamer's Embalming. Some called him totemic, a tamer with a bit of the lion in him. Others, a saprophyte. Yet regardless, you can all guess how he went, and it wasn't pretty. Neither the act nor the conundrum of burial, his half-corpse forcing us to kill the beast, spill its belly in the 3-ring dirt to retrieve the missing pieces needed to finish the puzzle. Sad, he had been so proud of being a simple man in life. But what came pouring out looked largely uniform. The bloody pre-performance feed, suddenly so similar to the man himself, a mess of blue digestive juices. So we voted to defer the decision and bury them together. Send them on as a symbiote, the lion and the tamer, each with a bit of the other inside. Trust that whoever received them was more suited than we to judge what belonged to whom. So that guy was only 28 years old. That's not too bad. It's really a difficult thing when you go through your old work. I'm sure any of you who write feel the same way. Then you go through this work that's 25 years old and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, who was that? I really messed that one up, or so forth. But it's also pleasing when you go through and you find the occasional one that you really do enjoy. The wind is coming up and down here. It's actually not that bad, which is not something we say, and it's a perfectly blue sky, which is not unusual, but it's not usual either for Newfoundland. And the real hard part here is that it's about 30 degrees here today, which is not what I signed up for when I moved to Newfoundland. So I'm more of a 19 degrees and cloudy kind of guy in that Scots-Irish kind of Highlands tradition. So I'm going to read a quick poem from my second book, which is the book that I wrote first, so it has the more juvenile poems in it, but I've come to the conclusion that I needed to honor that kid. So that kid was 24 when he started writing, and he published his first poems by the time he was 25 or 26. He was brash and audacious and really just wanted to be Leonard Cohen or someone like that. And while he may not be a great representative of who I am today, he is who he was, and I have to give him his space, and I have to let myself accept that. I'm watching my own kids now around that age, 23 and in their early 20s, and watching them make their mistakes and be brash and be overly confident, undercautious, and it's kind of exhilarating to watch. So I imagine it's exhilarating to be there as well. I can hardly remember being as it was 25 or more years ago. So the second book was called The Cottage Builder's Letter. I'm going to read a short little poem from this called Library. This is me at my most Leonard Cohen, wanting to be him, my hero. Library. Maybe you know how to live in a way that isn't just about breathing, but I don't. So please, reserve this space for me. Rest here a moment without thinking. In what manner you choose to keep your books, I know this little part of you. Hold it sacred. It's your other secrets, if any, that are not safe with me. So, I go on in my third book to write a book that is largely about the nature of disaster and cataclysm. I had just been through the disaster of 9/11 while I was living in New York City, and I happened to be working right beside the World Trade Center when it came down, so of course I was a little bit shell-shocked, and I had moved from a small press for my first book to a large press for my second and third, and I published a book of poems that was basically about imminent environmental collapse, about political collapse, about social collapse, and basically everything that happened in 2016 and on, but I had written it in 2001 and 2. And published it in 2003. I'm not going to read from those because they tend to go on a little bit, and they tend to be rather dire and dour and so forth. But I wanted to tell you about it because I think it's actually maybe my best book, but it's one of my best books for sure. But it didn't get much attention at the time, so if you ever get a chance to pick it up, it's called The Hunter. The next book that I wrote in 2007 was called The Rush to Hear, and it was another book of sonnets. This time I was trying to work in the traditional sonnet form, so I was trying to do end rhyme and the volta and Shakespearean and Petrarchan styles and so forth. But I found that the constraints made me twist my language in such a way that I was often ending up with this faux Elizabethan, sing-songy, rhymey kind of Shakespearean sound, and I didn't want that for this book. So I invented basically a form that I allowed myself, instead of rhyming sounds at the ends of lines, I would rhyme ideas. So I call it thought rhyme, and essentially what it is if you have the word night at the end of one line, you can rhyme it on the next line with darkness or day or night, like night on a horse, or soldier in that matter, for that matter, a knight. You could rhyme it with thing, which is an anagram of night. You could rhyme it with all sorts of anything that sort of fits the thought pattern. Antonyms, homonyms, synonyms, anagrams, and so forth. And it worked out really well as a form, and it allowed me to really do some interesting things in the sonnet form. So this one, it's got a swear word in it, so be careful. It's called The Devil. I don't know if this is the kind of sonnet you expected to hear. Run, fucker. Run like the devil is horny and you're the last man standing on Judgment Day. There's nothing on your tail now but age and night, and still the highway stretches on so hard. Eat, run, don't you dare look at those exits. They're gaping mouths. He's coming, building, working at the edges of your establishment. Who ever gave you permission to exist? Fatigue is just another step towards thrill, and standing means you're alive, at least for now. No one can tell you how things will be later, but being the last piece of meat, you please his sense of timing now. The pendulum starts rocking, and the devil, boy, he lives for the sound of ticking. So that's actually a Shakespearean sonnet in style. It just doesn't sound that way, does it? So there we go with that one. I published some aphorisms, and then I went on to publish a book called Whiteout. And Whiteout was basically a grouping of poems that I had written over many years, and they came together in the one volume published in 2012 or so. I'm going to read this, and I'll read one from the new section, skipping over another book called Diversion, but the new section's got some of my favorite new stuff in it. So this poem is the title poem from Whiteout, called Whiteout. Pull the car over and take a moment to note that this is where the road ends, notwithstanding the memory of the path continuing around the bend. The last red tail lights are painted over, and the snow presses its face up against the window, begging to be let in. Turn the engine off, it says, and hear this original soft sound, a book of white nothing. I am life without known rules. No signs, no lights, no lines on the road, no ditches, no asphalt or curbs. No people to see, no horizons or turns to make, no destination. Draw aside. Let your engine die and will compromise temperature, color, sound. I am life where life heaves, turns and reads its final leaf. Inside, the tick-tock of cooling machinery. Outside, the rattle ends the needless scenery. If the road goes on without you, it goes blind. Here, all is only static and knuckles cracking. Here, you ease the tension ahead by waiting, despite the chance of being hit from behind. All right, so that was Whiteout. In the new book, the new section of the book, I have a number of poems that I've written in the last sort of 5 or more years, and one of them that ends the entire thing is a poem called Places Everyone, which is essentially like many of the poems that I've come to write into my middle age, wrestling with concepts of being and being present, being attentive, but also being alive versus not, which is all of us get both of those things at one point or another. So before I go, I'd like to thank Donna Kane and the Peace Liard group that has put this together, because I would never have been able to get out to do this in these crazy times. So thank you, even though this is super awkward and weird that I'm sitting in the middle of a forest trying to record this with people walking by on trails. I'm very pleased to have done it. So thank you very much. Places Everyone. It is late, and you are always late arriving, and the bell has rung, and the lobby lights are flashing. So watch the crowd to see where you're supposed to go. Track the shapes of those ahead looking to find a seat, filing through the dark beyond the doors, but stopping before the curtains. It was a mad rush getting here, but now it's out of your hands. And soon the spotlights will rise with everyone in their proper places, and the tale will be told. It is time to make your last breath deep enough to recount how it all went in its entirety. The story of how you came to be standing here in line at the will call, late and waiting on a ticket reserved in your name for a show you aren't even sure is still running, and of which you've only heard one thing: there will be no intermission. Thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the festival. I'll see you in the workshop. Bye-bye.